And let's shift focus now. 2021 may present many opportunities for small and medium enterprises, but they should approach these with caution. A just concluded forum on the SME outlook for 2021 lists coronavirus vaccines, possibly the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and recovering economies amongst factors that support SME growth this year. It is not expected to be a walk in the park, considering how badly the coronavirus pandemic has affected the sector. Well, let's discuss this further with one of those panelists. Diana Gichaga, the managing partner of a private equity support, now joins us via Skype. Great to have you with us, Diana. Now, of course, despite these predictions that most African economies are poised to have positive GDP growth this year, some experts do say that around 60% of SMEs will close down before the COVID-19 crisis is over. Not a good outlook there, but just how much has Africa's SME sector been tested by this pandemic, and what are the realities in terms of their survival going forward?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. And I think it's very pertinent given the economic outlook that we just had discussions on this past few days. The first thing I'd like to just say is, even as it is said that 60% of the SMEs will likely close before the COVID-19 crisis is over, is to realize that the SME sector by its very nature has a high mortality rate. So it's important for us to take those figures into context. However, that said, I think what we need to also understand is, because the COVID-19 pandemic was an extreme economic shock against the fundamentals of many businesses, not only were these businesses affected at an economic level, that's on the macro level, sector level, and then individually at a company level. So it would portend that this will likely bear witness the fact that, yes, 60% of SMEs might end up closing. And in terms of how they were tested, I think the key thing was just, first of all, access to capital, and not just capital in terms of working capital or financial support. Movement of human labor was interrupted. Productivity therefore had to decline. And when productivity declined and people were not able to go to work, that also affected the demand side. So as a company, you're not able to produce enough or sufficient amounts of your product or service to be able to meet your overhead costs. Your customers are therefore also not able to pay for their products and services. So this, in effect, it was like a double whammy. Everything and anything was being thrown at these companies. So when you talk about what this was what we call a worst case scenario. As people in the investment industry working with SMEs across 17 countries in Africa, this is something we always say, can you plan for your worst case scenario? So what this did was force SMEs to say, if this is my worst case scenario, I've just come through it, did I have the proper plans in place? Did I have the proper infrastructure to help me bounce back, and to what level? So I just say that the pandemic just took away the blindfolds and forced SMEs to face their reality in terms of how they were going to make it out of these economic issues.
Well, when we talk about what the picture will look like going forward, there's a lot that has been put forward in terms of how they can adapt to this new normal and remain resilient. We talk about digital technologies, for example. So give us a sense of how the sector can thrive, especially without what you mentioned, the usual financial channels open, and of course, supply chains disrupted as a result of the pandemic.
That's actually a very good question. I think the key thing towards survival for SMEs is to just determine one thing. Where does your greatest risk lie? And then deconstruct what that means for you. So for example, is it that I'm not able to get my goods or services from point A to B? Then what does that mean for me as an SME in terms of the redundancies and the plans that I have to make? Secondly, who are my drivers of growth? Who are my customer segments? How is the economic outlook going to impact them? So for example, you'll find that sectors that didn't perform very well across the continent last year, for example, things like education, hospitality, tourism, they are starting from a low base. So it is expected that if any growth is to happen in some of these sectors, because they're coming for a low base, it'll seem to be more substantive. But remember, if you're coming from a negative, it always seems to be much bigger. So if you're an SME serving some of these sectors, what you might want to do is see, do I have diversity in terms of the clients that I'm serving, so that there's some sort of redundancy that's built, some risk mitigation, so that you're not tied. Your fortunes as a business, your fortunes as an SME are not tied to a particular sector. And I think the other thing that will make SMEs thrive is to understand how they manage their cash flows. Obviously, financial institutions were not able to continue lending, and we saw a lot of SMEs coming in to restructure. But remembering that is only one source of capital. You need, as an SME, to understand how you can manage your cash flows, especially given the situation that the pandemic brought on us.